and welcome to the Flourishing Center Podcast. I'm Amelia Zhivatovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living, and we're so grateful that you're here. Each episode features 3 sections. First is the Science Says section, where we summarize a recent research study and show you how to put the science into action. Next, we give you a research-based life hack with simple strategies for incorporating positive psychology into your life for greater well-being. And then our Practitioner Corner is where we interview someone who's out there living, breathing, and spreading positive psychology in their own unique way. Learn about how they're growing their personal and professional work and get inspired with strategies for how you might use positive psychology in your own life. Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Flourishing Center Podcast, where every week we put science into practice. This week we have an interesting research study that explored the role of social comparison and how that impacted eating behaviors. From that, we journey on to a conversation around how to not be as impacted as we tend to be with other people's judgment of us. How you can create a thicker armor to some of those worries that we fear as a result of our social comparison. And lastly, in our Positive Psychology Practitioner Corner today, we've got Nancy Bonamy, a French-speaking coach who is taking on the bold and courageous journey to translating positive psychology. Welcome to the Science Says section of the Flourishing Center podcast. Today we're covering an article that was recently published in the Journal of Eating Disorders. The name of the article is What's That You're Eating? Social Comparison and Eating Behavior. What I find really interesting about this article isn't so much the relationship to compulsive eating or eating disorders, although that part is interesting as well. But in this article, they explore the concept of social comparison. In particular, the researchers highlight that social comparison seems to be a basic drive that we have as human beings. It enables us to assess the correctness of the opinions, abilities, and emotions of other people. And it enables us to know where do we stand. The researchers say that without an absolute indicator of these qualities, people need to rely on comparing themselves with others in order to know where they stand. This is what we call social comparison. And it's so important to recognize that voice of feeling insecure when it comes up, when we're looking at other people who have done things we haven't done yet, or when we watch people doing things that we wonder whether or not we have the capacity or the tenacity for it. And I appreciate how these researchers have highlighted how social comparison relates to other elements of our behavior. If you're interested in looking at the original research, you'll find that they conducted it specifically on eating behavior to look at how people's eating would be influenced by the people around them. Again, an interesting study, but the part I really want to highlight is driving home the idea that social comparison has, for thousands of years, served an evolutionary function. So next time you find yourself comparing yourself to others, remember that this is natural. This is what happens when we don't have an indicator to hold ourselves up to. And we as human beings, we want to do well. We want to be competent. We want to make sure that we are getting the best out of this life that we can. But without an anchor, we wind up searching for anchors. And especially important is to think about how can you create this internal anchor to yourself. A lot of this research study looks at the role of how people's food consumption is influenced by the people around them, which of course makes sense if you've ever been at a restaurant where they give you a bigger plate and you have more food on your plate and you wind up eating that much more than you would if you perhaps didn't have that much available to you or if you weren't with such a large group of people. And the reason they're suggesting this is impact is because we are social creatures, and when we are around other people, we're more likely to compare our behavior to theirs and mimic our behavior to theirs, or at least use their behavior to influence ours. And I thought that was kind of interesting, particularly as it related to food consumption, because what would it be like if more people just actually consumed what their body was telling them they wanted or the amount that they wanted? So I think it's an interesting thing for us to keep in mind, this idea that our body is wired to compare ourselves to others. Our brain is wired to compare ourselves to other people. And if we know that tendency within ourselves, we can hack it. And that is one of the many things that we're going to be exploring in our next life hack. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's life hack. Today we're exploring how to be less concerned about other people judging you. Today's life hack also comes with a story. So this hack came about from one of our coaching students who is in the process of completing her coaching certification program with us and has been a recent graduate of our positive psychology training program. And in our program, we do a combination of practice coaching and then also receiving coaching. And as this coach was in the hot seat receiving as a client, she talked about how she's been feeling quite a bit of anxiety at the thought of being the demo coach. She talked about how one of the things that comes up for her is this debilitating sense of panic and fear around being evaluated and being judged. And of course, as we went through the coaching process, one of the great things about coaching is that you create a discovery or an uncovering. And what we uncovered here was that while she was concerned with being judged by others, she realized that she herself was being judging. She said, wow, that's really judgmental of me to just judge that other people are so judgmental. And she realized that part of the process for her in embracing, feeling comfortable in that center of other people's focus is that she might want to embrace letting go of her judgment of them, and that it's an internal process that we can play around with. And I can relate that to times in my life when I felt myself so debilitated by other people's perceptions of me. I felt like people were constantly looking at me or caring about what other people thought. And I realized that the reason for that was because I was so gosh darn judgmental myself. I would walk down the street and I would evaluate what people were wearing or what they looked like. And of course it would therefore make sense to me that I would assume that because I'm judging other people, well, they must be judging me too. And as I dropped my judgmentalness, and of course not 100%, which of course is impossible to just never have any judgment thoughts ever again, but as I found a greater sense of appreciation for those around me and recognizing my own hypocrisies and the things that I was worrying about, I found greater ease. And little by little by little, I found myself less afraid, less intimidated, and less held down by what other people have thought of me. So I hope you embrace what our coaching student and coach embraced, which is recognizing that if you're fearing or thinking that other people are judging you, perhaps it's great to explore how you can judge less yourself as well. And when we shift, things shift around us.
Next up, listen to Positive Psychology in Action with our Practitioner Corner.
Hello everyone, and join me in welcoming Nancy Bonamy. She is an expert in transitions, resilience, and well-being. She specializes in helping humanitarian aid workers and expatriates by helping them boost positive changes in their life and their career. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. However, she has lived in many parts of the world, which she'll tell you about. And something you might not know about Nancy is that she loves chocolate, and every day is marked with just a little bit of sweetness, preferably Swiss chocolate because she is Swiss. So Nancy, it is so great to have you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Emilia, for welcoming me here today.
Nancy, tell us, how did you get started in the field of positive psychology?
Well, to make a long story short, I think to explain that I need to just go back a little bit about where I come from, meaning that, like you just mentioned at the beginning, I'm a multi-expatriate, meaning I'm an expatriate since more than 20 years, and I lived a lot of transition in my life. I lived in 10 different countries all over the world, and I had as well 4 different careers. And at one stage, all these changes were at the end I could change them in something positive, basically. But there were two careers or two transitions that were more difficult for me. It's the day where I became a mom, because it was like a tsunami in my life. I had to find again what were my priorities, how to balance my working and personal life. So that was a big change for me. And the day I came out from the humanitarian field, because I worked for 10 years as a humanitarian delegate in war countries where there are armed conflict situations. So the day I decided to quit this job was very difficult for me to find a new career that was as meaningful as this one, that could combine all my past experiences. And that's little by little where I came to positive psychology, meaning that I started to read books about positive psychology to find out how I could maybe better transition and so on and during that time. And finally, during all this time, I decided to study again and to study coaching. So I did that in New York, where I did a year certification in personal and professional coaching. And during this training, I learned a lot about positive psychology, but it was only in surface. So I decided then later on to really go more in depth into that. And that's when I started to this certification with the Flourishing Center.
Beautiful, Nancy. Thank you. And tell us, what are some of the ways in which you're utilizing positive psychology professionally?
So yeah, it changed a lot for me. I was using a few things here and there, but thanks to this certification with the Flourishing Center, I have a lot of different tools that are all science-based to offer to my clients. So what I use a lot with my specific niche of clients, meaning the expatriates community and the humanitarian workers, is how to transition better, how to boost positive changes, how to have a vision about what you would like to do, not only next year, but in 5 or 10 years, because from there on, they can take better decisions for today, or how to increase your well-being. What happens often with humanitarian, for example, is that they take care of others, but they forget to take care of themselves, or they think they don't have the time, or it's not a priority. And what I learned through my personal experience as a humanitarian, as a mother, and then thanks to the training, is that to be able to take good care of others, really need to take good care of ourselves first. So there are a lot of tools for that. I think one that was, at least for me, very important, and that I often give to my clients, is how to deal better with your mind chatter, for example. How to deal better with should it be your worries, should it be your rumination, to be first kind with yourself as well, so that you flourish better. That's one of the things. So mindfulness is very important, is a very important component of my coaching as well. Then it's a lot about goal setting, goal meeting, how to reach our goals, because often it's easy, or not always easy, but if we set goals, it doesn't mean that we will meet them. So there are really great tools to help us meet our goals, how to make sure that we can do that. And so it's this kind of course, resilience. It's a huge part of what I speak about. So mind chatter is one component, but it's as well about emotional resilience, how to deal with your emotions, and then even physical resilience, which was for me a big discovery during this certification. How important it is to move, exercising of course, but to move, simply to not be always on your chair, and to move, to breathe well, and all this stuff.
Tell us more about your background. Where were you actually born, and what are the places that you've been to?
Okay, so I was born in Kinshasa, in DRC, in Africa. And after that, when I was only 1, I moved to Germany for 4 years. And after that, I moved to Switzerland, which is my country of origin. And I lived there until I was 20. But all my life, I said I will go back to Africa, because I was born there and I wanted to go back to Africa. So first, what I did, I was a teacher for primary school. So the first posting as a teacher was in Africa, in Madagascar. So I did 3 years there as a teacher. And after that, I went to France, where I changed completely my career. I became a professional manager for professional musicians. So I help musicians to get into festivals and to have and all this stuff, basically. And after that, I decided to really go into a humanitarian organization. So I started to work with the International Committee of the Red Cross. And there I worked first in Jerusalem. Then I went to Chechnya. Then I went to Sudan, South Sudan and Darfur at that time. And after that, I worked in Iraq and then a few years in Geneva as well. So I came back as well in my home country, which is for expatriates. Often we say it's more difficult to go back home than an expatriation as such. So it's an experience as well to go back home after a few years of expatriation. So I was 3 or 4 years in Switzerland. Then it was countries with more diplomacy than really a conflict situation. So we went to New York and now in Washington. And actually, my husband is still working for the International Red Cross. So that's why my life is still, every 3 years we know that we move. So I had to find as well a job that is compatible with my husband moving all the time, my small children now that are 7 and 9, and the fact that I want to spend time with them, but as well flourish professionally. So that was the big transition for me. And that's what I have now by being self-employed, being a coach, and offering now workshops as well about positive psychology.
So much richness to your life experience, and it's inspiring for me to hear you share also with our listeners this ease with which you just let yourself go where the universe is taking you. I think so often people feel a little stuck, like, how do I make a career transition? Well, you've had 4. You've had 4, and that's one of the beautiful things about our world today is that people can continue to learn and grow and follow their heart and just see where they're being guided. Nancy, I know that there's so much resilience work that you must find within yourself, as you said, moving so often, and also with your young children and how you help them adapt to the changes. And I'm curious, what have you learned about helping your children to grow up to be more resilient, both through positive psychology and through your life experience?
Yeah, it's really the big, because when I started the positive psychology certification, I thought about it especially to use it professionally, but it was such a personal transformation. And now I brought a lot of it to my family and to my children. And I love all the tools that we can apply to the kids. So a few things. First, I explained to them how the brain works, because that's a big finding for us, but a big finding for them to understand that there are times where suddenly we have, when we are under emotions, we have really the amygdala who is taking control, and it's not our thinking part who is taking control. So just by breathing, just by taking some time to breathe, they can come back to a place where they can think better about the situation, not react too fast. About growth mindset a lot, meaning that now I really face the importance of, it's important, the learning process is much more important than the result as such. Saying it's good if you have good grades, it's good if you are good at something, but what is more important is the energy you put into it. And if you are not good in something, you can decide to be good in that. You just need to work on that. And I think that for one of my son, it was important messages to bring to him. And as I explained once, I have as well done a lot with them about strengths, because I love this topic. So I know from positive psychology now that we have 24 strengths in us. Some are more developed, other less, but we have all of them in us. And that was something that I wanted to discuss with my kids and bring this vocabulary to them, to know that perseverance, that kindness, all that are really strengths, creativity and so on, and to discuss that and to see what are their strengths and how they could use their strengths when they face a problem or when they want to do something, and so on. And that was really interesting. We did a family tree with the strengths of each of us, so that we can see together where we are. We have common strengths and where one of us can really bring his own strength in the family and so on.
I love that. Thank you so much for highlighting those 3 absolutely powerful things to bring into the family dynamic. Teaching children about how their brain works, that they have an emotional part of their brain and a rational part of their brain, and what happens when the emotional brain gets a bit hijacked. Oh, so incredible. And then to give them words at such a young age to capture that they have strengths within them. And it's not just what they do. They're different than their skills and their talents, their strengths of how they be in the world and how they shine, and that we can highlight and amplify these things. Nancy, I'm curious, what are some of the interventions that have helped your expatriates and your humanitarian workers through your work? What resonates the most with them?
I think there are 2 or 3 things. One is with all of them, I asked them to pass a test to find their strengths, actually. And for most of them, it's very new and very strange, even at the beginning, to speak about strengths and not only weaknesses. And to have this knowledge, it really helped them to then use their strengths or develop their strengths to transition better, to create the change they want, or for some of them who want to change career, to be able to speak about them in a different way with a new vocabulary. That's one thing. And another thing that is often very surprising for them is that some of them are spouses of expatriates, and they come, they follow their husband, and they left their job, their life, their friends, their family home, and they are now here and they don't know what to do in their life here. And they consider this time in expatriation as a parenthesis for them. And what I tell them is to really look into what do they want in 5 years. What is their best, what would be their best self in 5 or 10 years? And for them, it's strange at the beginning that I ask them to project themselves so far, because they think about just now here as an expatriate. And that's wrong, because if they want to take good decisions here today, or to make the most of their expatriation here today, they really need to have a vision about what they want to have in 5 or 10 years. So that's one thing that we do through visualization. And yes, of course, I speak a lot. That's more through my workshops, of the importance of being in the present moment. Because again, as an expatriate, we tend to some of them tend to either think about what they left and be always in the reminding in the past, in their home country or the previous country, because they loved it so much. And some are already all the time in what will be next, what will be after this expatriation. And they don't savor so much the present time. And that's so important, to be really in the moment and to savor it, not to regret later on that we didn't savor and take the most of what we had right now. And that we know now with positive psychology, that it's anyway one of the most important things for your well-being, is to be able to savor what you have, and to be grateful for what you have, to find the positive in your situation today. So that's some of them, but there are lots that I can now give to the expatriate and humanitarian link to positive psychology.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nancy. And you mentioned that mind chatter is one of the skills that made the biggest impact on you. And I'm curious, what are some of the other positive psychology interventions that nurture your self-care?
So again, quite a few, but I think what I can mention is mindfulness again, but that's really a huge one. Not only meditation, but really mindfulness. I'm the type of person that I go a lot by foot, I more than driving. But when I was going somewhere, since ever, I'm running to that place. So I was only concerned about the destination and never enjoying the journey to the destination. So when I go to pick up my kids, I was almost running to go to pick them up, and with my thoughts, or either with what I still had to do or with what I will have to do, and so on. Now I learned to appreciate the journey to them, and I know that it's really helping myself, because my mind is making a pause, and my mind is looking at the nature around. It's really, because in Washington there are a lot of trees, so it's looking at what's going on around. It's smiling to the person I just see. It's really savoring the fact that I'm walking and not only thinking about the next step. And that gives me a lot more presence for my children, a lot of more presence for myself. So that's one of the things. I learned through the mind chatter, what I learned is to be less perfectionist as well. Before I wanted to be everything perfect all the time. And I think one thing I know now is to be more kind to myself. And one big insight I had is to understand that we never talk to our friends as we talk to ourselves, meaning that we are often so harsh for ourselves. We would never say that to our best friend. So I try now to be as much as possible my own best friend, so to talk to myself with compassion, with understanding, saying it's okay, you were not perfect, but it's okay, you will learn out of that, and that's huge for me. That's really helping me a lot. I think I'm much more aware about my emotions as well, how they work, why they are there, that they are all useful. That very recently, I had very bad news about a very close friend. And I was, of course, very sad. And I think in the past, I would have just thought I should not be sad and try to avoid that. But there I allowed myself to be sad during two full days. And it allows me today to be much better and to move forward, because I know that each emotion is important. So I think that's another thing that I learned.
These are incredible. Thank you so much for sharing such specific tools and pathways that we can take on. And as you know, and our listeners might know, we follow the mind-body medicine affirmation that self-care is healthcare. And I celebrate that you do the simple things like recognizing that if you walk a little bit more mindfully to pick up your kids from school, that it'll make all the difference in the way that you connect with one another. And it's not about the big things that we do. It's the micro moments of connection, micro moments of tuning into oneself, micro moments of caring for oneself that lead to the overall well-being. Thank you for sharing those with us. And Nancy, I'm curious, how would you define flourishing?
Well, that's a good question. For me, flourishing, and that's from CAP or from the Flourishing Center, is becoming the best version of ourselves. It's just being us, but being us as we would like to be, and being us, the best of us, basically. And that's what I love about it. It's not to change us. It's just to make sure that we work with our strengths, that we do things that help us being the way we want to be. Speaking about self-care, one thing I understood is how much sleep has an impact on myself. If I sleep well enough, then I will be well for myself first, with my emotions and everything, and for my children and for my family and for my clients and for everything. I know that now very well. So now to flourish myself, I need to have my sleep. So meaning I cannot do that every day, but I will make sure that if suddenly I'm out of track with my sleep, first thing I will do is to work on this one. So for me, flourishing is to be able to be the best of yourself.
Beautiful, Nancy. Thank you. I love that expression. And in addition to all the wonderful work you're doing in the world in sharing positive psychology, you're also multilingual. And I'm curious, what languages are you bringing positive psychology into, which can be so helpful for our international audience to hear? And also, what are some of the challenges that you've noticed in translating positive psychology, both through vocabulary, but also multiculturally?
So I work in English with my little accent, and then in French. So that's the two languages I work with. For me, the challenge would be more in English, actually, because I want to make sure that the way I transmit the things are well understood and that it makes fully sense to people. Thanks to the fact that I studied in English, I think I have the basic vocabulary. Then in French, what is difficult is that we don't have the same kind of words. Or in English, there are words who are really very well illustrating some concepts that in French we don't have. So you have to make more sentences or more explanation about what we'll speak about too. So it's more about that. And culturally, I don't find big challenges, maybe because all of my clients are expatriates, so already people who are used maybe to be in different culture. I would say the big difference maybe between the Americans and the French-speaking population is how much we tend more in Europe to look at the negative side of the thing. So we all know now it's due to our brain, and we all have that. But I would say it's a bit more strong even in Europe. And then the fact as well that so that's the big thing maybe. And even in the if you look at schools, the way education is in schools here in the US, it's much more focusing on the positive. Than it's in France, in Switzerland, we tend to first underline what's not going well before underlining what's going well. So that's a bit the thing.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Nancy. Tell us, how can people learn more about you and what you're up to in the world, and perhaps work with you if they're interested?
Okay, so I have a website which is like my name, nancybonamy.com. So nancybonamy.com. And thanks to CAP, actually, because it was a dream since a long time. I like to write, and I wanted to launch a blog. And thanks to CAP, I found the courage to do it, because I have so many things to say that in addition to coaching and workshops, I really want to reach more people by explaining what are these positive psychology tools. So I have a newsletter now, a blog that I write every 2 weeks in French and in English. And so people can subscribe to the newsletter if they want to know more. I started that in beginning of August, and it's really speaking about positive psychology tools. And I have as well published 3 weeks ago a free ebook that gives you 9 keys to boost positive changes in your life and best navigate in your personal and professional transitions. So it's in French and in English too, so you can download these ebooks. That's a way to get to know me a little bit more, but on my website you have as well videos about me and so on.
Thank you so much, Nancy. You're a prime example in our model of what it means to be an individualizer change agent, meaning you're primarily offering individualizing, and you're adding in and empowering yourself as an inventor to create learning experiences for people as a way of both getting your word out to a wider audience, but also to give you ways of bringing more people into your work for the individual work, which is really exciting.
Thank you so much, Emilia, and all your team. I mean, my life really changed, and that's in my first blog. My life really changed thanks to this certification. And it's not only that I was trained in positive psychology, but it's really that I'm now part of your community and this big community of like-minded persons, and that you continue to give us a lot of information and possibilities of trainings and programs and so on. So thank you, Emilia, for all what you did for me and all my fellow students.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world and sharing positive psychology in this unique way with so many. And we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks, Nancy.
We hope that today's episode has been helpful for you, giving you opportunities to look at things like judgment and social comparison through the lens of what is it trying to offer us and how can we think the way we want to think, feel the way we want to feel, and do the things in this world that we want to do. Thanks for listening, and feel free to check out more information about positive psychology approaches to becoming happier and healthier at our website, theflourishingcenter.com.